All right, welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study in the book of Genesis. We will be continuing looking at the life of Jacob, and we're going to be in chapter 32. We're going to be finishing up chapter 32. Just as a quick recap, as you're finding your way to Genesis chapter 32, you remember that at the beginning of this section, Jacob is on his way back home, back to the promised land. He had finished a meeting with Laban. They've broken their ties together. They've made a covenant, and they basically said, I don't want to be around you anymore, and, vice versa. Neither of them wanted to be around one another. So they make a covenant. They're not going to pass over this certain border, and they're going to ask God to be the witness between the two of them. And so Jacob is on his way to now meet his brother Esau. And he doesn't know what's going on with Esau. He doesn't know if these 20 years have made Esau's heart softened. Has he kind of forgotten about what Jacob did to him? Has he forgiven Jacob? They didn't have email, they didn't have telephones and things like that. He couldn't just call him up and find out where Esau's at with him. So he sends messengers to him. He's on his way. He's got to find out what his brother thinks. So he sends messengers. The messengers come back and they say, yeah, your brother's coming out to meet you, and he's coming out with 400 men. He's coming out with 400 men. He's coming out with a small army, and Jacob doesn't know if this is a welcome wagon or they're coming out for war. And we don't really know what's on Esau's mind. We kind of theorized. We thought, if it was us, maybe we'd bring our small little army just to show, maybe as a show of force that maybe we don't intend any violence, right? Maybe Esau doesn't intend to do Jacob any harm. Maybe he just wants him to see, listen, behave yourself, right? Behave yourself. We're not sure. But the messenger comes back, says, your brother's coming out to meet you. So Jacob does a number of things. He divides up his families, his flocks, all of this kind of stuff. He devises a plan, and he prays to God. What he should have done was simply prayed to God. God had said that he was going to be with him. He's mentioned he was going to be with Jacob a number of times. He's not left, but Jacob still has some lessons to be learned, and he's fearful. He's fearful of his brother. So we kind of ended there where Jacob sends out his gifts, and he instructs them that as these people show up in these droves, there's gift after gift that's coming out to Esau. As that happens, they're to say, these belong to you, right? Esau's going to say, who do these animals belong to? Who's all this stuff belong to? And they're to say, it's yours, and your servant Jacob is coming in the end. And Jacob says, I'm hoping that this is going to ease Esau in some way. Maybe he's trying to buy him back or repay him. He's trying to placate his brother, and that's where we ended. So we pick up in chapter 32, starting in verse 22, and it says this. It says, the same night, that is the same night as he sent out all those presents to go ahead and meet up with his brother. It says, the same night he arose, took his 2 wives and his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." And Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. All right, so we want to ask the question, what is the significance of this event here? Many of us, maybe many of us have already read this text before. Maybe we've heard about it before. Very common, very popular, well-known event and story. But we want to ask, what is the significance of this event? Well, here we have to remember that Jacob has been fighting and struggling his whole life. You remember that even in the womb, he's grasping onto his brother's heel. That's why he was called supplanter. He was called Jacob. So his whole life, he's been wrestling, he's been struggling, he's been fighting. He wrestled and fought with his brother. He tricked his brother. He fought with his brother over the birthright. He ends up tricking his brother out of the blessing. He ends up wrestling with his father, Isaac, really, doesn't he? He tricks him. He's wrestling there. He's struggling. He's striving. When he's with Laban, he does the same thing. He's wrestling. He's struggling. And now he'll be fighting against God. In a very real way, though. In a very real way. Hasn't Jacob been fighting against God this whole time? I mean, isn't that really what's been going on? He's really been fighting against God. God has said that he was going to bless him. God said that through him he was going to receive all of these things, and yet he's still wrestling. He's fighting. Trying to do things on his own. Trying to get it done by his own power, by his own strength, by cunning and trickery and deceit and deception. Really, he's been wrestling against God his whole life. And here it kind of comes to a head. Here it kind of manifests in a very physical way. Does Jacob know that this man, the text says, is a man that wrestles with him? Does Jacob know that this is an angel of God? I don't think so. Not at first. Not at first. Think about this for a moment. Think about this. Jacob is on his way home. He sent out messengers to his brother Esau, who the last he knew wanted him killed. The last he knew, his brother Esau wanted him dead. He hears from the messengers that 400 men are coming out with Esau. That's an army. We know he's afraid. He says he's afraid. He plans, he plots, he tries to do all these things. And here he's alone, and a man meets him. Could it be possible? Could it be? Is it likely that Jacob thinks that this might be an assassin sent out by his brother or a spy from his brother or something along those lines. I think that's possible. I think that may very well be what he thinks is going on at this point, at least early on, at least at the beginning, right? After all, again, who else would be tracking him down in the middle of the night? Who else is going to be doing this, right? So this has to be on his mind. Again, Jacob knows his brother's coming out to meet him with 400 men. It wouldn't be unusual for someone to send ahead scouts or spies, possibly an assassin. Again, Jacob hasn't met with his brother yet. He doesn't know if his brother's still angry. So I think it's very possible. And I'm not the only one. There are others. There are other people who have looked at this and studied this text who believe that Jacob thinks he's wrestling with, struggling for his life. And this is possibly someone sent by his brother Esau. Well, eventually Jacob realizes that this is no ordinary man, right? Something is going on here. And in fact, he's meeting with God in a very real way, in a very special way, in a unique way, right? The man or the angel, right? It's called an angel elsewhere in Scripture. The angel tells Jacob when daybreak happens, right? They've been wrestling all night. Jacob's a strong guy. He's holding his own there for a while. He's wrestling all night, and the angel finally says, "Let me go." And Jacob says, "I'm not going to let you go." He wants a blessing. I want to be blessed. You got to bless me. Isn't that just like Jacob, though? Isn't that just like Jacob to try to force a blessing be given to him? Right? I mean, it's really in his character. It's in his nature to try to force a blessing. I know he has been being molded. He's been being shaped. God has been working with him. And he's really not the same man he was when he had left. But he's still got a lot of that old baggage with him. There's still a lot of old habits. And I think it's very interesting that Jacob wants to try to force a blessing. I'm not going to let you go. I want you to bless me. And what does the angel ask? What does the angel ask Jacob? He asks him, what is his name? Now, I don't think the angel had no clue who he was wrestling with. Again, some of this stuff, a little bit of speculation, but this is an angel from God. May very well be the pre-incarnate Jesus. This may be a theophany. This may be the Word before he took on flesh. I think the angel clearly knows that this is Jacob. I think he knows his name. What's he doing now? What is God trying to do? Well, Jacob's name means what? Well, it means cheat. It means thief. It means supplanter. It means a crook, right? That's what the name means. I think that this is God getting Jacob to confess in a way by mentioning what his name is. His name is Cheat. What's your name? My name is Thief. My name is Crook. My name is Supplanter. He's been a cheat and he's been a liar his whole life. But here things are about to change. See, the angel says, your name isn't going to be Cheat. It's not going to be Thief anymore. It's going to be Israel, which means one who has striven with God and prevailed. And Jacob, in the midst of all of this, all that's going on here, he's touched in the hip by the angel. And he has a limp from this point on. And very interesting that after this point, every step that he takes, he's going to be reminded of this encounter with the messenger from God, isn't he? Every step he takes, and it's probably painful, every painful step he takes, he's going to be reminded of this encounter with God. He's going to be reminded that he's got a new name, which says there's something new about him. How did God get Jacob's attention at this time? Well, he got his attention by bringing some pain into his life, didn't he? He touched that hip socket. He lives with a limp now. God used pain. God used a bit of suffering. Would God ever do that with us? Would God ever use pain or suffering to get our attention? You know, sometimes the only way that a child will listen is if they get a bit of a spanking. Right? A parent spanks their child in order to get their attention sometimes and to help them. Right? It's not to be mean. It's to help them, to grow them, that they might become mature, moral people. We want them to make a change because we want what's best for them. Sometimes the only way we will learn is if we receive some pain, if we receive some discipline. Yeah, God does the same thing with us today. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 11 says, "Don't despise the Lord's discipline." And in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 32 it says, "But when we are," this is Paul speaking to Christians, he says, "But when we are judged by the Lord, we are disciplined, so that we may not be condemned along with the world." Sometimes we need to be disciplined. Sometimes we need a spanking. Sometimes pain is the only thing that will get our attention. God used it with Jacob. God used it with the nation of Israel. God used it in the first century with the church. God will use it today as well, and does use it today. It's always for our good, though. He's not vindictive, not being mean. It's for a reason. There's a purpose behind it, that we will not be condemned along with the world. So what we find here is this is another major turning point in the life of Jacob. There's been a number of these points where things have changed, where there's been a progression towards something new. There's been a big event that's happened in the life of Jacob. And here again is a major transition point. Again, he's even renamed Israel, right? So Jacob is named, or renamed, we could say, and he in turn names the place Peniel, which means the face of God. It's commemorating the fact that he has encountered God in a very real way. That there's some significance here. Remember that when someone has a name change or a place is named, there's something special, there's something significant, there's something meaningful and important about that. Jacob receives a new name, and he in turn names the place where he wrestled with God, the face of God. He names it that. And listen, we too have received a new name. We too are new people. We too have been changed. We've encountered God in a special way, in a unique way, through Jesus Christ, and we too have been changed. New creations. Something different about us. An encounter with God often changes a person. I would say probably an encounter with God always changes a person in one way or another. Further harden their heart or softens it and breaks it and molds it and shapes it. Here, Jacob has been shaped. He's got a new name. We too, when we encountered Christ, when we encountered God in Christ, we were changed, given a new name. Right? Even the book of Revelation will talk about that, receiving a new name. Yeah. Well, in the next chapter, we will see finally the encounter that Jacob has with his brother Esau. Jacob is now ready. I think he's ready. He's ready to meet with his brother. He's been broken. He's been changed. He's been molded. Is he going to be perfect from this point on? No, but he is changed. He is different. He is being molded and shaped. He's not the same man he was when he left the promised land. As he re-enters the promised land, he is a different person, and he's ready to meet his brother. All right, well, we'll leave it there for this week, and next week, Lord willing, we will pick up in the next chapter, chapter 33 of Genesis. I hope you'll join us.